fun.
Those Were the Days is filmed before a live internet audience.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, meine Damen und Herren, and welcome to Those Were the Days. We have an amazing, almost hour of nearly free podcasting show business for you tonight. We are going to test our host's knowledge on late 90s alternative music acts. We will meet a man who can use chopsticks with only his nostrils, and our musical guest this evening is teabagged by Poseidon. I'm your host, TV's Travis, but I can't do this alone. Oh, no. With me is my former sister-in-law's ex-wife's college roommate, Stephen Adams.
You shouldn't smoke, kids, but if you do, you should learn how to eat, regurgitate, re-eat, re-regurgitate, then swallow those cigarettes. I mean, how much harm could eating the cigarettes really do anyway? And you'll make a bunch of money, or at least entertain a couple people for a few minutes.
Your cool-ass pal who just wants to make out with all the chicks, Amy Frost.
What can I say about a show whose one redeeming quality was that the musical guest had a theremin?
And we can't have a show without a member of the fabulous Sweatsuit Squad. It's Audie Norman.
Comedy Central Pitch Department, Herb speaking. Oh, hey, Marv, been a while. What you got for me now? Representing a magician named Tom Malika. Okay, what's his act? Uh-huh. With cigarettes? Really? Sorry. No, I just had something bad for lunch. Go on. So he does what now? Nope, I'm okay, but I think that's all I need to hear. We got a little variety show I think he'd be perfect for. I mean, heck, we've got an animated talking poop on the network now. Hard to tell what isn't acceptable anymore. Talk to you later, Marv. We'll set it up.
If you haven't figured it out by now, we are talking about variety shows this month, and I decided to go really weird and off the board with our first entrant into that, which is a lesser-known show from the late 90s on Comedy Central called Viva Variety. It was a spoof on kind of European variety shows, while also being just a straight variety show of its own. It did star Thomas Lennon and Carrie... what is her last name?
Mulligan. Nope.
No. So they were playing the characters of Mr. and the former Mrs. Lepan, Meredith Lepan and Agatha. And then they had their announcer / friend, I guess, Johnny Blue Jeans, who was played by Michael Ian Black. These were all members of the comedy troupe The State. And one of the things that I liked about this show was that those were the characters they played, and that was it. They didn't have other characters that were on the show. They just had their variety acts, whether it be magic, some sort of weird talent, their musical acts, and they would do little sketches and skits in there. And they would also involve members of the audience and do some games. We watched season 2, episode 5 of the show. It ran for 3 years, 1997 to 1999. So first, what I want to know is, starting with Audie, had you ever heard or remember Viva Variety at all, let alone watched any of it?
Not at all. Like, don't remember it, never heard of it. This was totally new watch for me.
Okay. All right. Stephen, how about you? Had you heard of this show, let alone seen it? I'm assuming you hadn't seen it.
No, I definitely hadn't seen it. But I also definitely hadn't heard of it before. But I'm going to tell you something about the way Viva Variety made me feel. I watched this and I was transported to a time where I was sitting in my bedroom with my stupid 8th grade friends on my blue carpet, staring at the TV, Comedy Central, looking at them laughing while I was trying desperately to understand what was going on. That's where I felt like I was walking into a time portal. It was amazing. Mentally set myself as 13-year-old Steven. It was wild.
How about you, Amy? Were you at all familiar with this show?
Like, I feel like I probably heard like the Comedy Central bumper preview for it, but I had never watched it. Unlike Steven, I was not transported. I was looking through a window and into the 90s, and I did want to pull the shade down. And I just
Mhm.
on behalf of everyone, from myself and everyone else who was alive in the 90s, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
don't know what happened.
So I do remember this show. I remember it debuting. I had watched a little bit of The State, but I was much more of a fan of Kids in the Hall. That was kind of the real like sketch comedy that I watched. But I knew of The State, and then this show came around, and I don't know what it was about it, but my friends and I just enjoyed watching it, and it led into a lot of times it led into the first season or two of South Park,
Mm-hmm.
and we were watching a lot of that at the time as well. So, Michael Ian Black, who went on to have quite the career, as did Thomas Lennon and Carrie Kenny. That's her name.
Yeah.
She played Agatha. They all went on to have quite a career, whether it was Reno 911, or various other things. The thing that I enjoyed about this show, and I feel as though I'm on an island here, is that I found it to be just this really dumb, goofy thing that had this brand of humor that knew exactly what it was trying to be. Like there were episodes where they would have fake commercials like old variety shows would have in the middle of it, but they would be like they had an episode with a fake commercial for their Viva Variety brand cigarettes, except they couldn't actually do a commercial for it because they weren't allowed to. So the whole thing was a parody of mid-show ad placement by talking about how they can't do a commercial for it and you shouldn't smoke. But if you do, these would be the type of cigarettes you would say have a very smooth taste to them, but we can't say that.
That's
That
good.
kind of thing, and there was that, and then the games themselves that they would play were silly, and they're so dumb, but for some reason they just made me laugh. This particular episode, they played the game Chicks with Dicks, where they would
I have never wanted to crawl out of my own skin quite so badly. Oh dear God.
The 90s, man, was a
It's not
time.
okay. I'm so sorry, everybody. I don't know. I mean, I was there. I feel like I should have done something. I don't know. I was in high school. I don't know. I didn't have a
but
lot of power then, but
but I should explain that
I'm sorry I let this happen.
the game was about getting an audience member to name famous actors or people named Dick.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of innuendo. This show was rated TV PG, by the way,
Wow.
Wow.
which blows my mind. Some of the stuff they could get away with. There was an earlier episode where they played another one of those types of games, but it was Mork, Bjork, Bork, or Pork, and so they would give you a thing, and you had to guess which one of those it fell into. Or one I saw also another one of their games was Dunking for Dollars, where they would bring up an audience member and offer them money to dunk somebody in a dunk tank, but it would be like an elderly priest or an old woman, and it was the moral question of, will you dunk this person for $20? And so it's just silly games like that. But the variety acts they would get were real, performers. Tom Mullica being the one in this who does. I'd seen his act before, not just from Viva Variety. I've seen that act. It is the most unique, I would say, magical act that I've ever seen. There's nobody else that ever did that, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Because he would basically eat an entire pack of cigarettes for his lit cigarettes for his act every night, along with what probably I would say an inch thick stack of paper napkins.
Yeah, napkins.
Yeah. No, thank you. Mm-mm.
What I want to know, how do you find out about an ability
You
like
have
that?
pica, is
Yeah.
how you find out. You have pica and you are untreated. This is how you find out.
And apparently, so Tom Mullica actually had an act going, and then he met Red Skelton, and Red Skelton kind of told him like, "Hey, you should, you've got something kind of cool here, but you should do it without any dialogue. Don't talk,
Mm-hmm.
kind of mime it all, and that will allow you." So he was big overseas because he didn't have to deal with the language barrier. He could just do his act like a clown, and
And they love
so
cigarettes.
Oh yeah.
they do.
Yeah. 4 at a time,
And
whatever it takes.
and like his look too. He's just got like a very goofy, you can see the Red Skelton type of influence on his like facial expressions and things like that as he's doing
for
it. And
sure.
just the weirdness of the whole act. It's so bizarre you almost can't look away from it.
It's like
No, I looked away plenty. It was fine. We
Audie
talked about
had me
pre-show,
so
like,
scared. Yeah.
I
like,
had to
Steven was
Google.
like,
I had to prepare myself. I had to go. I was like, "What am I getting
Steven was
into?"
like, my stomach could take it. I almost blew chunks right here
Yeah.
watching it.
I'm that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. Like I'm a Ripley's Believe It or Not fan, and like people eating bowling balls and like choking them back up does not get me for whatever reason. And I don't taste the cigarettes. Like when you watch it, you can kind of feel you're like, oh man, that's terrible. I'm just like, look at this guy. He's like a cartoon character. And there's disbelief. I'm like, where is he stashing these? Like, is he got like a gerbil? Is he packing them in his? No, I'm pretty sure he ate those things.
Yeah, no, he did. And he didn't live to be very old.
Yeah,
I had a magician
I'm
friend
shocked.
in college, and he used to do a trick where he would hammer a nail up his nose.
Mhm.
And do you know what the trick is to hammering a nail up your nose? Is that you hammer a nail up your nose.
You hammer a nail up
like
your
you
nose.
just
Yeah,
do it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's human
you just do
blockhead.
it right.
Yeah.
And this is, I feel like, similar. The real trick
Yeah,
to eating
no, it's-
cigarettes is you just
it's-
eat the cigarettes.
Yeah.
It's a carnival trick. It's like a sideshow attraction where it's a human blockhead.
Yeah.
And he basically somehow, somewhere along the line, figured out he could do that with them lit, which is the crazy part.
It's like the guy who eats a light bulb, right? I mean, they eat a light bulb. That is what they do. Amy's exactly right. There's no trick. There's just they do the thing that a normal sane person doesn't do. But he did it with flourish.
I mean, he did it with flourish, and he made a career out of it. So
sure.
If you do it,
why not?
in secret, then you wind up on, a TLC special. And your family gathers around and they try to help you.
My Strange Addiction featuring Tom
Yeah.
Malika.
Yeah.
I can't stop eating lit cigarettes, yo.
And then the show would have sometimes this episode had a little dance number from the swimsuit squad that was very much their version of trying to be the Fly Girls from In Living Color was basically what they were going for with that. And then their musical guest in this episode, it was Fishbone, and Amy mentioned the theremin. Now here's the thing is
Fishbone.
I remember this specific episode because at this point in my life, I had heard a theremin many times. Anybody who's a fan of Star Trek has heard a theremin before, but I had never seen a theremin. And this episode came on when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. I think I was 15 or 16, and I watched it. And I'm watching, and I don't know that I had ever had anyone explain what a theremin was to me. And so I saw this, and it just looked like dark magic.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is that guy waving his hand over a thing on that desk? And sound is coming. What is going on? And so,
and the best part is though, right? So it's in a suitcase,
Mm-hmm.
which at the end of the act he packs up, and he has with him, because they do the thing that all of these shows do at the end, where everybody's just there and they say goodbye, and he's still got it the whole time. It's just like handcuffed to his wrist, the theremin.
He is not letting that theremin go.
Well, he was ahead of his time, right? I mean, you're right. People know about him now. They know about him because YouTube. But back then, like, you might know the sound, but the dude's playing electromagnetic waves. Like this, he's just playing air, and that blew my mind. I actually wrote down, "Holy cow, is that a theremin?" in my notes because it was just so.
I did Google
stunned.
to make sure. I was like, I am seeing this right.
They had
There's a lot happening.
They had every instrument that's quirky known to man in that band. They had a Zydeco at one point. I don't know if you heard that. They had the clav. The old the clav. What do they call those? I don't know. Stevie Wonder instrument. They had the theremin. I don't know what those dudes were saying. I have no clue. But it was awesome, and I'm gonna look up some Fishbone. That's all I know.
Yeah, that was real good.
Yeah, they were cool.
Yeah.
Also very 90s.
I have a little game for us in a few minutes that we're gonna play. But the thing, so I also enjoyed like the sketches that they would do or the little bits that they would do because again, they're the only characters are these three. And like for me I found it very funny when Meredith and Agatha are sitting there reading their notes back and forth to each other of the way that they addressed each other. That was such a dumb bit, but it's the delivery of it made me laugh. Or the whole thing of like he's introducing himself and then he goes, he can't possibly be as dumb as he looks, Johnny Blue Jeans. And like if you've followed Michael Ian Black's career, he's a really smart guy, but this character is crazy. At one point they make a joke about he had made these movies prior to Viva Variety called Hugo the Talking Hugo. And it was like this weird parody of Herbie the Love Bug.
Sure.
So there's all sorts of silly stuff like that, and it's such dumb humor, but it made me laugh, and so I enjoyed it. And that was the type of humor that would go throughout all of it, whether it was them having audience members guess if it was a piece of high fashion or a Klingon costume from Star Trek was one of their games, which is harder than you would think.
Yeah, I've seen Paris Fashion Week. That just happened. And I would be very lost.
So I thought it was a silly show, but I do have a game for you because our musical guest was Fishbone. Yeah. So I want to play a little game called Is This a 90s era alternative band that was featured on Viva Variety at some point, or is it just something that I made up?
Oh, this would be good.
So you don't have to if it is a band they were featured on the show. Okay. So I'm going to start with Steven. All right. I'm going to give you a name and you have to guess yes or no. Was this a band featured on there?
Yeah.
All right. Sister Hazel.
Yes.
Yes, it was. That is correct.
Ding, ding, ding.
They were good.
All right. Amy, your question. Wailing Souls.
Sounds too much like a band. So I'm going to go, you made that up.
No, that was actually a band on an episode of Viva Variety. Yeah.
I thought you were.
All right. Audie, here's one for you.
Here we go.
Crucial Taunt.
You made that up.
I didn't make it up, but it is a band from Wayne's World.
Okay.
So they were not on Viva Variety. Going back to Steven. All right.
Yep, I'm ready.
The Monsters of Mandalore.
No, that's made up.
That is a fantasy football team name.
Yes.
That is a good fantasy football team name.
It is.
Actually.
It is a very good one. Amy, to you, we have G Love and Special Sauce.
That's got to be a band.
That is a band, correct.
Yeah.
Very good one, actually. I like G Love and Special Sauce. And finally, Audie, for you, we have Three Men and a Little Lady.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say that's a band.
That is incorrect. That is a movie starring Tom Selleck.
Yeah.
That's the sequel to Three Men and a Baby.
The sequel to Three Men and a Baby.
Not remember they made a sequel.
Was it? It's Tom Selleck, Steve Guttenberg,
and Ted Danson.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
I forgot about that sequel. That was forgotten big time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another band was Luscious Jackson.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
But they did kind of go for a lot of these like alternative kind of rock acts on the show.
Real Big Fish was on there too.
I saw
Real
that.
Big Fish, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones were on the Royal Crown Review that I remember. This was in the late 90s kind of swing boom.
It was a ska, swing, horns in every band kind of moment in time.
Yes.
That was good.
Yes, it was.
That was good in the 90s and still good
That was
today.
good in the 90s.
I still listen
Ska
to
music
ska.
is the music that plays in a 7-year-old's head when the plate of mozzarella sticks comes out, and that is 100% correct.
That is accurate.
Yep.
Scott, I could be
So
having the
good.
worst day, and if I put on Real Big Fish, it will turn into the best day.
And the funny thing is, I have often said that the funny thing about like Real Big Fish especially is it's the most peppy, upbeat music with just the most depressing lyrics you'll ever
Oh
hear.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Real Big Fish's first major hit was a song called Everything Sucks.
Mhm.
Like they just, but then you listen to punk music and it's all this angry stuff, and
Yeah.
but the lyrics are all positive and like,
Yeah.
do your own thing and you're awesome. Like it's so crazy to listen to. But yes, ska, especially that third wave ska, that mid 90s, late 90s ska will just put you in a happy mood. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
because it's
Like all of a
such,
sudden you're just wearing like checkerboard shoes. Like I
Yeah.
don't know how it happened, but here we are.
yeah,
Playing mini golf somewhere.
yep.
And, like
Mhm.
Real Big Fish, they have their most recent album called Life Sucks, Let's Dance. Listen to that, and that'll be stuck in your head for days. And it's just great pandemic era album, and you're like, you know what? F it. The world's burning down. Let's have a good time.
But it's the same thing if I listen to like old Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. If I listen
Sure.
to Royal Crown Review was one I remembered because I really enjoyed them, and then I was like, holy crap, they're on a TV show. This is crazy because some of these bands you'd never think to hear of, or like I was introduced to G Love and Special Sauce from Viva Variety.
Wow.
So
Well, I'm taking Fishbone with me from this show, so thank you for that.
you're welcome for that. Apparently not for anything else, but that's okay.
It's all right. It's good.
It's the thing was, I've been on this kick lately ever since I read the thing on Twitter about parodies that are actually a good version of the thing they're parodying, and that was what drew me to this, because I looked at a bunch of different variety shows, and I know there's classic ones and there's like sketch comedy. I thought about SNL, but like SNL kind of, I want it to be its own category for us at some point.
Sure.
And like
Yeah.
I probably sifted through a dozen Kids in the Hall episodes trying to find one that I wanted to do, but I just never quite found the thing that fit what I wanted to do for a variety show. Those were sketches.
Yeah.
And then I remembered this show and I thought, oh, this is perfect because it's got my stupid humor in it, but it also has like the variety show aspect of everything, which is a type of show that really fell out of favor by this point in time
Yeah.
in television history. Like the variety shows were huge in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Everybody had one. Everybody was on them. Into the 70s.
I mean, we got YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can watch a video of a band playing a song, and then you can watch somebody do something stupid, and then you can watch like an animal do a trick, and then you don't need someone on TV to do it.
There's something about doing it together at the same time on network television, though, that
totally
is a different experience. And we're gonna have to revisit this category because you're right. This stretches all Sid Caesar's show of shows, like all the way back to the 40s. Like.
Yeah.
This ruled television for years.
Yeah.
The 4 shows we picked, like I've looked at the list, they're 4 shows, but I can think of 10 more we could have thrown in the mix that we aren't touching. Like it's amazing.
And the thing with variety shows, they not only ruled television for a long time, but they were the way you found out about certain things.
Right.
America found out about the Beatles because of Ed Sullivan. You learned about the Rolling Stones because they would play a variety show. And really from like the early 70s on, you had Saturday Night Live and you had some of the late night talk shows, which even those slowly went away from the variety show style to just straight talk shows. But that was it. Like you just didn't get them anymore. Except for SNL, even in Living Color was, that was sketch comedy with occasionally a musical act.
Right.
Yeah.
Kids in the Hall was sketch comedy. So Viva Variety for me was kind of a cool thing to look at because is at the very end of kind of what we're looking at in terms of eras of television, but it was trying to bring that idea back, but do it in a new way with this. It only lasted a couple of years. It wasn't super popular. But I felt like it did a good job of trying to be a variety show and at least trying to do that format again. And I think it was also very smart of them to do it in, half-hour timeline.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're going to get in, we're going to do a couple of rapid fire stupid things, play a song and get out. Yeah. And it's not expensive to shoot really. I mean, all of your money is going to paying the band and the variety acts, which
Yeah.
we all know those don't get paid very well. So having a small cast and can do it, in a small studio and have a small studio audience there, it's the kind of thing that I can understand why it didn't last very long. And given the fact that I am outvoted 3-1 on whether or not it was any good, I get it.
So I think the audience thing, I think that might have been part of it too, because I was trying to figure out, like, because there was something off-putting about the audience laugh, and I think that's what it was, is because it's such a small audience, and you can tell, like, they did
Yeah.
not sweeten it at all, and so
Mhm.
you can tell that there's like 20 people there, and it for whatever reason it was like, because the sort of the show is like the story of the show is that it's it's the big European variety show, but it's here in the US, and so you like feel like it should be bigger and that it is definitely 20 people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed the fact that they wanted to make characters out of these people presenting the show, and letting that be what they were doing. And I like Thomas Lennon. I think that he's funny. And this was sort of my first introduction to him, which is why when I would watch him pop up in other things, I'm like, wow, he's way different than I would have thought,
Mhm.
because he's so energetic here as Meredith Lepan. Um, but I liked that idea of, let's take the variety show idea and then mix in some sketch comedy with these characters, but that's it. Those are our characters, and everything's gonna be based around that. And the show did end with they called it the marriage special, and I think if I remember correctly, Meredith and Agatha actually get married again.
That was a
They
good
did
ending.
Nice.
they did a special in Las Vegas for one of them, and they actually had a reunion show just a few years ago, like a 25th anniversary reunion show for this, that they did a live performance of Viva Variety. So they all still really like it. It's just one of those things where I also think that the show is kind of criminally underseen. It's because it's not available anywhere. So much of
Sure.
that
Mhm.
era of stuff that was on like Comedy Central, it's just not out there. Somebody had their old VHS copies and digitized them and put them on archive.org.
Yeah.
And and even those aren't the complete set because there's a lot of repeats.
Yeah. And what a wild time for Comedy Central and MTV and all, like it's had there was a vibe around all these Viacom properties, because I think Comedy Central and that's all owned by the same people. But there's this like rambunctious set, camera zooms in, zooms out, wild color palette thing that was going on at that time. And I think that's what was what transported me back in time, because I'm seeing shows like Singled Out and whatnot on MTV. More shows I didn't understand, but my friends were like, "This show is great." I'm like, I don't get it.
Well,
So,
seeing this, like the commercials took me back, seeing that, hey, South Park has only just had its first season.
Right.
Holy crap. I remember when that hit and everybody was talking about South Park. Like a buddy of mine got the bootleg of the one that they didn't air on TV where they're killing Santa and swearing like crazy, um, just before it aired. And then at the end, Daily Show with Craig Kilborn.
oh yeah.
I was like, holy
Ben
cow.
Stein. I was like, what are we
Oh,
doing?
When Ben
Uh-huh.
Spends Money. That was
Oh,
my jam. I love that show.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a time where Comedy Central really like wanted to experiment with some different stuff,
Mhm.
and so they threw the spaghetti at the wall with Viva Variety and wanted to see, and it stuck for a little while. It just didn't last super long, but I kind of miss seeing that. Now, Amy brings up a good point, which is that you can get the variety show experience just through YouTube in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I did kind of enjoy. There's also like a manic energy to 90s era shows that I feel like you can experiment with and get away with a few things that just you would never think to do. Like you would never think to make a variety show, but also make it like this weird comedy and have these through threads of like the couple that hate each other but yet get along well enough to do the show. I also love some of the jokes he would make on her wardrobe.
The Puerto Rican funeral. That was good.
There's one later on where she's wearing a dress and it's got a bunch of feathers on it, and he just stops and looks at her and is like, "Did you have a run-in with an ostrich before the show? What happened?" because her costume would get more and more ridiculous as it went along. So I had a good time with it because it's just stupid and I can kind of park my brain and let the dumb humor take over.
Oh yeah. My thing with these shows, and this is probably going to be the case with several, is that a sketch show, if a skit doesn't land for you humor wise, you're cringing for 5 to 10 minutes, which is kind of happened to me a couple times. Travis, I know it's everybody's got a different vibe. It's not making fun of your sense of humor. There were a few things I'm just like, oof, this isn't working for me. This is rough. But then Tom Mullica comes on, and I'm like, all right, I can watch this. This is all right. I'm entertained. So it's like hit and miss.
I think because I also, like you were saying, you kind of transported back to being 13 and watching a show that you didn't quite get. For me, it was transported back to sort of early high school and that sophomoric humor that just made you laugh, and you're like, this is stupid, but why for some reason find this funny.
Sure.
And even though I know it's a bad joke, it's not really like a well-written joke, but there's something about it that for me I can appreciate.
Yeah.
But I have an odd sense of humor at times too that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So
there's like it's a Mad TV versus SNL kind of vibe. Like Mad TV for me has never been funny, like ever, to me. But SNL has funny here and there, and this felt more like Mad TV-ish, like lower production quality, very small audience, like Amy was saying.
I can see where you're going with that because some of those early seasons of Mad TV I enjoyed, because they weren't trying to just replicate the humor that you would find on SNL. They weren't trying to be SNL necessarily. They were able to, because it was smaller, they were able to kind of go different directions. I think some of the jokes don't play as well today. I think that's another part of it is, it's just like the cigarette tricks. Like cigarette tricks aren't going to work today because nobody wants to do anything involving smoking.
Or regurgitating those cigarettes.
Well, that too.
Poor
It
Audie.
was the best non-smoking ad. Like forget Dare. Like what were we doing? Like just this, and then I never want to be near a cigarette again. Ever.
It works. It works, right? So yeah, I mean there's not a whole lot more to say about Viva Variety as a show, but I do think that variety shows, the beauty of them is there's a vast assortment. While all kind of doing the same thing, you get, because it comes down to sort of your hosts and the vibe that they want to put into that, right? So whoever it is and whatever type of vibe they're going for, which is why you get the differences with like HeeHaw or Laugh-In or Ed Sullivan or whomever. It's just, there's a lot of differences to those. So variety is a great word for it because you get different acts and different things. And this was like kind of that wanting to be edgy late 90s version of one of those shows. So I think I can pretty well guess that none of the three of you want to watch any more of this. I'm getting shaking of head from everyone.
I don't want to crap all over your TV choice, Travis. And I don't think the show is necessarily to blame as much as maybe the era that it was sitting in is some of the issue. Where I look back and much like Amy just go, I'm sorry, we just didn't know.
I'm so sorry.
It's like being that middle school kid just listening to Korn and Limp Bizkit and acting stupid. You're like, why did we do any of that? Woodstock 99's documentary hit home for me. I'm like, what are we doing?
I after I watched this, I put out on my Twitter that I know I was there, but like, were people okay in the 90s? And one of my followers said, we weren't, but we had the Spice Girls, and that made us think that we were.
Yeah,
I
we
was
did.
like, okay, that's fine. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely, this was much more of like that kind of I don't want to call it underground because it was on Comedy Central, like it was on a major cable network, but it's got that feel. It's sort of like it's kind of, I would make the comparison with, say, Johnny Carson and David Letterman when they were running concurrently, where Carson was, was mainstream, and Letterman didn't want to just be that. So he would do all sorts of, like, especially if you go back and watch or find any episodes of early Letterman stuff, it's a lot. He took a lot of risks. He went a lot of different directions with stuff that he would later on kind of smooth out, because he was late show. He was way late at night. He didn't have as many restrictions, and he didn't want to just be a carbon copy of Johnny Carson. So he was going to go in some different directions. And I feel like that's kind of what a lot of people growing up in that era going into the 90s, suddenly they want to do that. And when it's a comedy troupe like The State, they get offered to do a show like this, they're going to try and push the boundaries, which is why it's amazing what they were able to get away with on a TV PG rating.
I think there's also something to be said about the state of Comedy Central at this point in the late 90s. Like, they were just starting to do shows like this. Like, again, South Park season 1 had just come out. We've got The Daily Show with Craig Kilborn, which, if you know your history, was not great until they got rid of Craig Kilborn and brought on Jon Stewart. Like, I remember watching Comedy Central at this time mostly for stand-up shows and the British Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yes.
Like, that's what I remember watching all the time on Comedy Central, and that's what dominated on Comedy Central. So I think there's also something to be said that the Viva Variety was just, kind of trying to stake a claim on this network where there wasn't much room for it yet. I think something like this probably would have done better a couple of years later.
Yeah, and I think too, when Comedy Central started to, The Daily Show, especially the way that it morphed from Craig Kilborn to Jon Stewart, and because early Daily Show had its moments, but it matured and it grew to be a better thing when Stewart took over. There was something he was able to do that Kilborn just didn't have, and this show, Viva Variety, is much more in line with your Craig Kilborn era Daily Show than later on. So it is more sophomoric, and I think that it had it maybe matured some and had time to grow, it could have had some longer lasting, but it wasn't really a show to do that. It wasn't, and I don't think it was ever going to be. So but yeah, that's Viva Variety. It's a quirky, weird variety show from the late 90s that look, if you want to watch it, it's up on archive.org. You can watch a bunch of the episodes. If nothing else, check out some of the bands that are on there. They had some good musical acts, and you can skip ahead and get through some of the cigarette tricks to get to the music.
I really do think people should watch this episode for the cigarette tricks. That mystified me. But then immediately go look at these other, like, Travis, the other episodes you had, Abe Vigoda was on one of them. Like, what Abe Vigoda and Real Big Fish were, I think, on the same episode, and Sister Hazel. Like, what is going on? I almost, if I had the time today, I would have watched it. I may still go back. So it's not a complete loss, because I'm looking at archived live performance footage of bands I like. So, I mean, let's go.
Okay. There was a great bit they did in their first season where they had Walter Koenig come on, and it was Chekhov does Chekhov, where he would read Chekhov as Chekhov.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
None
I'm
of
in.
This was funny. That's funny.
So I think, Amy, the problem was I picked a bad episode for you.
It was not good.
I think is what happened.
Yeah, let's say that.
So, but that's where I'm saying, like, the show.
Audie's never
the show could have.
Audie will never smoke again now.
No, I already had a big thing, like mental thing against cigarettes and smoking for personal reasons, family history stuff. So that just was like, thank you.
But I think too that sort of speaks to variety shows and how they can swing a lot of ways, right? Because it's going to really depend on what do you have for your act, who's your musical act, and like how much because if you get Walter Koenig in and you're doing Chekhov on Chekhov, like that's a bit you can do. But if you don't have that, if your act is the juggler, you only have like 3 minutes of that before you're done watching a guy juggle, and then you've got to fill that with something else. So it's sort of,
See,
I th-
that's what made the Muppets such a good variety show because it did not matter. They could carry a show 100% on their
Yep.
own.
well, I'm wondering too, like with the show, it's only 3 people, so
Yeah.
that's another part of it. It's a very small, and only having those 3 characters, not having them playing multiple characters in their sketches, may have been a little bit limiting too.
Yeah.
Hard to say. But I'll find the Chekhov on Chekhov one for you, Amy, and
All
I'll
right.
send you that. You can watch that because that is pretty funny. I think Whoopi Goldberg was on an episode at one point in like season 3. So they did quite a bit. There's 30 something episodes that got made. But yeah, that's our start of variety shows for this month. We've got some fun ones coming up too. Now, who's Audie? It's you next week, right?
Yeah, buddy.
All right. What are you bringing us? Where are we going?
Next week, I'm just going classic variety show. I am bringing us some HeeHaw.
HeeHaw. All right.
Oh boy.
And I thought about it because I've got some connections there, and I'll talk about it next week. But trying to find this online at all was a little bit of a challenge. But somebody had just recorded a bunch of episodes and put them on YouTube. So this particular episode is from 1985. It's numbered 137. I have no idea if it's season 16 or 17. I tried to find through IMDb, and even their database is not complete with any of this stuff. So
I found that with a lot of these variety shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough to nail these down because it's like trying to find specific episodes of late night shows.
yeah.
For our audience's sake, I'm looking at our spreadsheet, and thus far, for the 3 episodes that have been looked at so far, we have archive.org, YouTube, and Dailymotion.
Yeah.
If you're wondering
Yeah.
how deep we have to dig for these.
And
Yeah.
those links will be in the show notes on your podcasting app. So just click the show notes and you can find the link to the next episode.
And I'll go ahead and tell you now, HeeHaw is a country music heavy show.
Yeah.
So if you are not inclined to listen to it, you can skip some of the songs. Willie Nelson does appear. And I forget which song of his that he does. He does one of his mainstays.
Man,
But
I'm
yeah.
never going to badmouth Willie Nelson.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I will eat at a Texas Roadhouse, so it's okay.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting tidbits I've started to find about this particular episode I chose, and it's one that's actually really good quality. So
Nice.
yeah, this will be fun.
It'll be fun. I have not. I remember watching HeeHaw, but it's been a while, so this will be kind of a fun little trip. So yeah, that's next week. We're going to be discussing HeeHaw as we continue a variety show month of a variety of different variety shows. We're going in a very different direction now, so this will be fun.
Yeah.
That's what's coming up next week. We have no feedback this week, but if you want to send us an email, thosewere-the-days@gmail.com.
Those were they show at gmail.com.
Thank you. Those were the days show at gmail.com. There's also twitter.com/thosedays show. You can hit us up there. And we put the show out once a week whenever Steven gets around to posting it. So this will be up soon, and we'll have show notes on where to watch the episode of HeeHaw that we're going to watch next week. And coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll have another poll for you all to help us choose our next category. So that'll be a
We'll
lot of
actually
fun.
have it this time.
We'll do it.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll
make
do
it
one.
happen.
Yes. So that's what's coming up is HeeHaw next week, led by our own sweatsuit squad member, Audie Norman. Until then, for Stephen, for Audie, for Amy, I am Travis saying thanks for hanging out and have a good night, everybody.
Bye.